Hello. So this video idea was literally just a shower thought that I had. So I thought I'd jump out of the shower and record it. Yeah, I am essentially today going to talk about my incredibly hot takes about the 13th Doctor era of Doctor Who. It's inarguable to say that this is the worst era of the modern iteration of the show. I've now watched all of Classic Who, so I obviously can't comment on that if there's an era in there that's worse. But most definitely, it's complete consensus that this is the worst era of the show. However, I'm here today to tell you that that doesn't mean it's all bad. There is a lot of greatness here that still leaves me a fan of the 13th Doctor. And I'll start with her directly. Despite being the figurehead, the spearhead, the lead of the worst era of the modern iteration of the show, the 13th Doctor is one of my absolute favorite Doctors. She is great. She might be my number two behind Tennant. Jodie Whittaker does an incredible job in her, performance of the Doctor. It's very David Tennant-esque, but also has a lot of uniqueness and charm that a lot of other iterations don't do. That makes her so stand out and unique. Like her feigned aloofness, her just the way she encounters situations and handles them is so unique and fresh and, gives her own vibrant personality. And it's why I'm such a huge fan of expanded material featuring her Doctor. Like, I've read a lot of fanfics with her as the primary focus. I've have a couple of novels that I've been wanting to dive into, featuring her. I know she's coming back for some Big Finish stories that I probably will end up checking out. I'm a big 13th Doctor fan. She might even be my number two favorite Doctor. So, I guess that's my first big hot take. And my second big hot take is that I like all of the companions from this era too, including Dan, which is a hot take. Yeah, I think they're all unique. I think they're all fresh. I think they bring a, diversity and vibrancy to the companions that we haven't really seen in the modern era of the show. I'm watching the first Doctor era right now and seeing, Ian, Susan, and Barbara as this companion trio, and it's kind of reminiscent in that it's almost like this. It starts off with three different people from different walks of life that all bring a unique type of character to the show that hasn't been seen in any other companions. They have these unique personalities. They're from different walks of life, and I think they all complement each other very well. And even when they replaced two of them and threw in Dan into the mix, I thought he was a very good addition as well, even for his short-lived stint. I think all of the companion eras are great. And that leads me into my next point, which perhaps is the biggest hot take. I like the Thasmin ship. I am a Thasmin shipper. It needed to be executed better, but if it was executed better in the material, I think it could have worked. I love the dynamic of the 13th Doctor and Yasmin. I think they're just two, I don't know, they just have such a good energy together, like two, best friends exploring the universe together who might be more. And it just, I don't know, I think about them a lot. I think about their dynamic a lot, and I read a lot of fanfic about them, and I think their relationship could have worked and should have worked if it was handled by a better writer. I don't think it's the relationship itself that's the fault here. I think it makes so much sense. And for, and this is probably a lot of headcanon and reading too much into it, for Yasmin, that comes from such a traditional household, traditional family that's probably been, she's probably been repressing her homosexuality or bisexuality, whatever it ends up being. It hasn't really been explored so much, coming from such a traditional household, that maybe this is she feels so free with this person that's giving her this insane experience, and she's sort of realizing that she has these kind of feelings toward a feminine presence, and she's so vehemently in denial about that, especially in her conversation with Dan. It was just so rushed, and it just wasn't handled well in the actual material. But there's so much there to explore that a lot of fans are doing in fanfic that's going that's touching on this and exploring it very well. So really, I am a fan of this dynamic, the Thasmin ship. I love it. And that leads me to the next point. I think the Sacha Dhawan Master is great. I think a lot of people misunderstand the character, in my opinion. I think he's one of the best masters, honestly. They say he's way too over the top. He contradicts all the master's character development from the course of the modern era of the show. And you have to remember, this is a time travel based show. In my opinion, and this hasn't been confirmed by canon, but it's my headcanon, I think it's way more likely that Sacha Dhawan is an iteration of the Master that comes before Missy. I think that makes much more narrative sense, and especially for the the character arc that Missy has and the shift in the character of the Master overall. And it makes so much more sense to look at Sacha Dhawan's Master as the sort of like time alignment parallel to Matt Smith's Doctor. I think because Matt Smith took a lot of the isms of the Doctor and made them so much more prominent and exaggerated and hyper, and Sacha Dhawan does the exact same for the Master, and they dress very similarly in similar aesthetics and styles. That's always how I pictured it. I always thought they were sort of the wibbly wobbly timey-wimey contemporaries of each other, rather than it being a later iteration than Missy. That's my interpretation of the character, and I think because of that interpretation, it works incredibly well. I think that Sacha Dhawan is an awesome actor and does such a good job with it. And I think Spyfall's good. I think Spyfall is good. That's throwing in a hot take. I think it's a good two-parter. Hot take. Anyway, I think my final hot take is the biggest, and that the Timeless Child arc could have worked if they had a resolution to it in the next season that essentially canceled it out. And here's my sort of explanation. I think that if in the next season they would have said the Timeless Child story is fake and that it was the Master manipulating the Time Lord archives to mind break the Doctor and essentially have his ultimate, victory over her, and, they could have done another explanation for Joe Martin's Doctor. They could have said, she was, a later iteration of Doctor from down the time, or a forgotten iteration of Doctor between two. They always do these, wibbly-wobbly explanations. I think they could have figured out something for Joe Martin. And I think they could have. And Russell T Davies could still do it. I doubt he will. And it's weird that Russell Davies kind of leaned into the whole Timeless Child thing in his era. And I'm like, he could have contradicted it because it's so bad. It's so bad, and it shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the Doctor as a character. But I really think that if they would have done that, and if they would have sort of retconned it out next season, I think it could have worked as a really clever and cruel exercise of what the lengths the Master will go to torment the Doctor. And I thought that would have been a really good conclusion to the arc. This isn't a Doctor's True Past story. This is a story about exploring another facet of the relationship between the Doctor and the Master. And I know that was a huge part of 12's era, and I know this is the next era immediately after that, so that's probably why they didn't go that route. But, come on. Do anything you can when you realize how much of a mistake the Timeless Child was. Do anything you can to retcon it. Come on. And Chris Chibnall, he really stood by it. He really stood by it. And you know what? I give him credit for that. He stood by his vision. It was terrible and showed a fundamental misunderstanding of the franchise. But he stood by it. Anyway, those are kind of my hot takes that I've been juggling around of the 13th Doctor era. I think there's a lot to love here, and I hope I've shared that today. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you agree with some of my stances. Let me know if you vehemently disagree. As long as you're polite about it. I'd love to, even the most disagreeing comments, I'd love to hear and see your stances. So, that's about it. Thanks for watching.